Since we're on,
Okay, okay, good to hear. Well, um,
at least Facebook's getting it. Whether or not they're showing it, that's a whole different thing.
yeah, I do see the live there. I'm going to put up this slide here. And folks, welcome to Quantum Leap with David and Corey. And we're going to have kind of a short show here today going into the holidays. And we don't have an 11 a.m. guest. But if you're new to the show, we talk about business development issues and small business in particular, networking, and me and my esteemed co-host Corey Knott. And Corey, if you don't mind just introducing yourself and tell us what you do.
Hey, I am Cory Knott. I am co-owner of Take Wing Coaching, and my specialty within coaching is that I do executive coaching for business partners. That's usually two or more people who have decision-making authority or principals in their business or want to be, and they all need to get along, have good trust, so that they can really leverage their strengths and abilities to make a business that is greater than the sum of the people. It's a much better way to go than solo, but oftentimes it's just not done well.
Yeah, great. And I do feel like collaboration in business is one of the most important things, but it can also be one of the hardest, especially if you don't have help. So,
Right.
yeah, do check in with Corey if you are in a partnership and looking to kind of accelerate your success or improve your success there as a business owner. And I just wanted to open the show today. I completed my trilogy of handbooks here aimed at business success. It's really introductory principles to, you know, being successful in business, getting on the path to being an industry leader, and then my new book, Thought Leader. And I just shot Corey a copy of my new book, Thought Leader, um, yesterday, but we're gonna and it's only available actually as part of this package deal right now. It releases on December 1st, so I'll put the links in the chat in the comments for you if you're interested in that. And this is really about strategy for success. It's kind of the introduction, and a lot of these are centered around your why. I'd say the critical pieces of these books are what I call the bread and butter of this show. Your why, vision, and what's the other one? I'm
Core
leaving out some
values,
core values. Yeah,
purpose, mission. Yeah.
definite plan. And I'm kind of jumping ahead here in the script. I feel like those things I didn't really see them satisfactorily talked about in a book before, and that's part of the big reason why I wrote these books. Is I saw as you go through these exercises with folks, and I almost feel like it's hard to get all of that out of a book. And that goes to the importance of in-person coaching, which I plan to refer you or help people out best I can. This is really my first iteration to put these ideas out. But how do you think? Do you believe it's possible to get that work done on your own out of a book, or do you believe you really need to take somebody through some of these key principles?
um, you know, everybody's different, right? There is no rule that you can't do it on your own, and I always like. I think Ivan Meisner says it best because you look at somebody like Ivan Meisner, multimillionaire. His company is now, I don't know, 500,000 members around the world. It's a global company. And for most people then coming into it or, hearing about him is like, okay, this guy's a major success. And he likes to say, he's a 30-year overnight success. And and he started out as a management consultant. So he knew a lot more perhaps than most people do going into business. And the point being is that we often don't know what we don't know. And some people, they hit the right formula from the start, and that might be, your 1%. Most entrepreneurs fail many times before they have success. And most of us can't afford that, or, we have to make a living somehow in between. So there's having a coach, having somebody to take you through, having masterminds, anything you can do to pull yourself out of your own head and collaborate with others to grow your business is great, especially you want to be around experts and people who are successful or know how to make success, because they're the ones who can give you that wisdom and see what you're doing that isn't in alignment with what you want to create. And that's what most of us do, is we often just get distracted by things, and or have an idea that this is how it should be done, when really it could be done a different way. And maybe your way of achieving success will be different than others. As a coach, mentors, consultants, and so on can see that, and help guide with correct principles, but at the same time to meet the needs of the client.
Yeah, and I'll just
We
say
all want to
my
be a
own.
little different. That's why we're entrepreneurs.
Yeah, yeah, and I
Go
mean
ahead,
that's
sorry.
part of why we do the podcast too. I feel like until I started kind of living these ideas, they didn't mean a whole lot to me until I saw them in practice every day. You can I feel like you can read all you want, but if you're kind of on your own, you're not going to do much in business, on your own, so to speak. So, um,
Yeah, and we can do a lot to shoot ourselves in the feet. I do a program, a very simple assessment tool. Well, not simple. It's actually really quite deep and precise, but it does have a person put down what they believe and then measures sort of how they think and how that belief corresponds with sort of an archetype of beliefs. And what's interesting is to see how people often believe something and then think a certain way, and it becomes very contradictory. So they wind up getting really stuck, where either they have to change the way they believe something or change the way they think about it so that they can move forward. And we don't see that, right? So that's one of the things I love about working with people who can open our eyes to that self-awareness, that it just
yeah,
isn't.
that's actually one of my favorite chapters in this new book. I just put up the table of contents, the thought leader, and since we've discussed a lot of these ideas kind of informally, but and then I decided to put them down in a book. And some of these things are a little bit newer. You may not have seen it because it is Bruce Lee's philosophy, which not everybody's kind of picked up a lot of his books, but it's a 133 page book if you count the blank page at the end. And it has 21 chapters, and it's really about how to develop yourself as a thought leader. And a lot of people don't, what is a thought leader, why a thought leader. And this goes back to just something I really discovered in business, that a lot of the most influential people in business, I believe, are thought leaders, so to speak. And you were one of the first people I met who I really saw as a thought leader that I admired. And I just saw, when you combine business with being a thought leader, it's a powerful combination. I mean, look at Ivan Meisner. He's like probably more a thought leader than anything else, even though he's an excellent business leader. So I know we've talked about this concept on the show, and I was just um, I don't know if you have any thoughts on kind of the importance of why somebody might want to look at developing themselves as a thought leader.
Yeah, I mean,
Who
there's so many different levels to go to with thought leadership, and it's really, do you have an idea? Do you have something that you want to put out to the world? And I don't necessarily, not necessarily be famous for, but to maybe change your industry or change the way people see things, and or to make yourself famous. I actually work with somebody who's a specialist in helping thought leaders build their reputation, and I know that a lot of her clients are, some of them are, people who just immediately have it and want it and just needs a little bit of that guidance. But others are like, I don't know, do people really want this? How do I get it to them? What's the right steps to take to make it happen? And a lot of it's like this, or it's they often talk about, people have stories and who write fiction, and they're, these famous fiction writers, they just have something they actually have to tell, right? I have to tell this story. And thought leadership is a lot like that. It's like, I have this idea and the world needs it, and it needs to be done in a way that they're going to adopt it. And but sometimes the fear is also that I don't know if they will, right? I don't know if this will actually be something that people want. So you're dealing with this sort of, it's like you can write a book and publish it, and maybe some people will read it and maybe many people won't, and you don't know, but you just keep telling the story. But in thought leadership, it's a little more challenging because you put a lot of effort into expressing ideas, and what is going to come back is hard to say. So
Yeah, yeah. And I read somewhere that that's the risk, putting it out there. That's the price of doing it. The risk that it'll fall flat and nobody will care. But I feel like a lot of the ideas, it takes something to bring them to life. Like you can write them down, but you have to live them, go talk out, present on them, maybe do blog posts, maybe tell people about them one-on-one conversations. So for me, I saw the development of some of this stuff as kind of the first step, and then it'll be kind of a year by year ongoing process of kind of how to get people's attention with some of this stuff. And I know the thing that really attracted me to Bruce Lee and modeling thought leader after Bruce Lee, that he's already so popular that you pick something that
right.
is popular, and you kind of just work in that lane, so there's a kind of a market or a big audience for those ideas, and what value can I add. And I think the value I try to add here is, I'm not talking about his life or his movies or his martial arts. I'm talking about his thought, which is something that his sister Shannon Lee and others have done in, better than I have. But I'm using this to kind of teach thought leaders with it, which is something they do in combination with their books. And I'll just take you through a few of these chapters here, and a lot of them are short, 5 to 10 page chapters. I think 10 is probably the longest chapter. And then they each, the whole book's really geared towards action. That's what I really loved about Bruce Lee as a thought leader, is that he lived it, but he walked the walk, which is something, such an important thing. And being, I actually would criticize people who don't kind of practice what they preach or walk what they talk. He has all these kind of great catchphrases that he uses, and I'll be putting out some of those quotes and things. But I think, so I talk about the path to becoming a thought leader. This is really the third in my trilogy. I think a lot of the stuff on vision and your why, I kind of left to those earlier books, that you need to do that work, but I didn't want to reiterate everything. So this is kind of the additional things from Bruce's thought that are going to help develop you as a thought leader. And a couple of these key things I'll just tell you about. There's the vision. I had to have a chapter on vision. I know, Cory, you're big on vision, but you have to, like you said, maybe you have this burning desire in you, but you have to have a vision for how you're going to put that out, what that's going to look like. I don't know if Berta, or how you see your vision for some of the outlay of some of your ideas, or how it's gone for you, 20 years ago, when I feel like you started learning about some of these things, and you've done a beautiful job of kind of learning how to teach people some of this stuff.
Yeah, I'd say probably I didn't really. I'm trying to think of when I really embraced the vision idea. It's probably more closer to 2010, and then when I became a coach, it became a big thing, right? So it's multiple pages. But I think what I realized was, we all have some vision, right? It's a dream. Put it on paper, it becomes a vision, and the real challenge is making it bigger, right? And um, because most people that I have worked with in the past usually write a few sentences. This is my vision, and it doesn't really encompass the details. It doesn't fill in the details. It's like I would treat a vision as being something like a moving painting, and the painting moves, but it doesn't move really fast. And the more detail it has, the more you can focus on it, right? Otherwise it's just blur, it's vague. And but it also moves in the sense that over time your vision does change, and maybe you want different things, or whatever that has to be, but still you're still filling in those details, painting those in. So that's really, for me, what vision has always been about, is making it big. And my mentors have said even go even bigger, right? So not just the big vision, but also the really detailed vision. And people just aren't really trained to do that, to think that way, or to take the time to do it. But that's, I think, as a thought leader, that is something you really have to do because of the risk involved.
Yeah,
And
and I mean, I think you're always gonna hit kind of dead ends or plateaus too. So how do you keep moving that forward when you get stalled? A lot of people just give up and say, "Oh, I can't do that," you know, and that's why I think it's a years long process. Like I sat on some of these ideas for a while before, you know, I started working on these books a few years ago, kind of in concept. And, you know, one example of how to bring a vision alive is to do some public speaking with it. And, you know, you kind of see where you go with it. And I know you do workshops and things. So I think that's a great thing I'd like to try with some of these ideas. I mean, I love that we can kick them around on the podcast, um, to illustrate some of these things. Maybe somebody practices the yin and the yang or the water way, or they read my book, you know, we'll ask them a question on that, you know, maybe months from now or whatever it is. So, because you want to have what you're working on kind of continue to live and breathe and kind of take on a life of its own, I'd say. But um, so, well, I mean, this book is really how to get started on that, you know, how to get started with that. And there's some gaps too, you know, definite plan. I didn't put a definite plan in here, although I mention it. Um, you mentioned the idea that we have that might need to be changed before we can move forward. I remember I took one of these early landmark seminars and the guy held up a pen and he said, well, sometimes you need to replace this with something like if you get rid of that pen, you have the space where that pen was that you can fill in with something. And I feel like that's how ideas are limiting beliefs, that when you remove things that maybe were inaccurate or not true, Bruce Lee calls it the empty cup, where if your cup is filled up and you're not going to listen to anybody else's opinion on that, that's kind of a limiting belief. So how do you kind of like be teachable, take a look at that chapter in the book at some point. I'll have to do a little bit more in detail discussion on some of these topics, but it's just a beautiful analogy he has about this master, the kung fu master, has tea with this other guy, and he's talking to him and he's judging everything the guy is saying, and then the master keeps filling up his teacup and it overflows, and he says, well, how are you going to listen to me if you don't, if you won't kind of empty your own cup first, you know, like kind of be ready to accept what I'm going to teach you or tell you, you know. So, and I know we've all been there where people aren't really listening to something you say. You know, this goes back to being coachable, which I think is such an important thing about, you know, hearing what somebody's saying. So I don't know. It is a huge concept for I think coaching and, you know, thought leadership, to really just accept that maybe all of our knowledge is imperfect, you know. And
yeah, in my world, in the NLP world, we call it an internal reference, right? Your internally reference versus external reference, and we all vary, right? There's no true know-it-all, though we have met a few who seem like they are. And then that's often, I mean, the know-it-all thing is kind of more of a protection, right? It's a way to protect yourself from being wrong, and that probably comes from earlier childhood trauma, where being wrong was a way to be, it's threatening. Um, but a lot of times people who really think they know their stuff, and they do, right? They may have a very good and deep knowledge of it, will sometimes discard the opinions of others. And so we have ways of that will slow you down, right? Because it prevents you from collaborating. It prevents people from wanting to work with you. Even, because they want to pass on information. And if you just discard it, it makes them feel bad, right? It's like, so why would I want to be with somebody who just, shoots me down my ideas because they think they always know better? And so there are ways to work around that, to empty the cup, as it were. And sometimes emptying the cup is literally like picturing emptying the cup and saying, how would I fill it back up? Right. If I didn't know any of this, how would I go about learning?
yeah, I agree. Um, I'll just say a couple more things, just a few, just quick intros to these chapters, which I actually think you're going to love some of this stuff, Core, when you look at it. We can maybe, once you get a chance to study it more, we can revisit some of these ideas on the show here, maybe next year sometime. But the concept of the yin and the yang, and I'd kind of heard about that before, just vaguely, but there's a whole kind of origin to this, and it really goes to Bruce Lee having this epiphany, and he's all yang, which is yang is kind of inflexible, kind of toughness, and his teacher saw this, that that's a big barrier to being a good fighter, and that you got to like learn to bend. Like yin is more the flexible, like the bamboo bending in the wind where the branch would break if it didn't bend. So he saw that Bruce needs both of this, that flexibility and the inflexibility, to be kind of a who he wanted him to be as a martial artist. And that's what his whole style of fighting is based around. When that person goes into you, you kind of use that negative space to strike after that. So it's you know, really goes to his martial arts. And but I think we can all learn something from this analogy of the yin and the yang. And I don't know if you've kind of looked at that before, or if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, not so much yin yang, but I'm kind of I love reading the Tao Te Ching, and so there's a chapter about this sort of idea that when you try to control and use to protect your power, right, and knowledge is your power. You take out the balance, right? You don't allow other knowledge in, and so it just has that same sort of thing. You're just inflexible, and it can work in really anything. And looking at that balance is, if that protection is, you're protecting your power is what you're doing, and by protecting it, you're not allowing it to grow or you know move where it needs to move.
Yeah, no, great. And then the last thing I'll say is self-actualization, because I wanted to get to a few of these other questions. I know you got to cover up for the rain too, so we'll try to keep it to another 10 minutes if you're okay on time with that. Yeah.
Big issue tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay. This concept of self-actualization, and I'd say this is probably the most important concept, and everything kind of builds towards this. And that's really about kind of live this practicing what you preach, or kind of living your truth. And Bruce calls it self-actualization. So there's a just understanding what that is, and trying to hold that up as something that you might want to get to. I think will open some eyes in terms of uh that concept. So i'm I'm gonna leave it there. I'll let folks look at that chapter, but it's really an incredible concept, and I'd never seen it described in the kind of detail until I saw Shannon Lee's description of it, and I kind of just um, summarize some of her thoughts on that. So do check out, the two biggest influential books on this book was this Be Water, My Friend, which I put on here. Shannon Lee, incredible book on Bruce's thought. And then this book, The Warrior Within, which he has a great chapter on the yin and the yang in here. And I think we can all benefit from learning these principles that Bruce actually studied to learn how to be a better fighter, but it ended up being a better how to live. And I think that's what a good teacher does. Is martial arts is more about the philosophy underlying it's more important than the actual just the kind of hand to hand stuff, so to speak. It's a whole kind of lifestyle and discipline. So I'll just show you the second half of the table of contents here, just so you can see what those are. It's how do I find my voice? So I get into things that are just being a thought leader, that are not necessarily things that Bruce taught or spent a lot of time with, although I did see him modeling a lot of these things. The Atomic Habits, a mastermind. Bruce was just great at building, collaborating with people. The written word, he did really extensive journaling and reading, and he was a great speaker too, mostly on kind of shows and podcast interviews, people interested in his movies and his thoughts. Because when he came out with the whole new discipline in martial arts, people like that was something totally brand new, and so a lot of people were wanting to interview him, and he has some great interviews too. How do I amplify my message? How can I build my brand? That's kind of what Roberta's thing. So, this gets into how to do something with being a thought leader, how to maybe make money and enhance the other stuff that you do. I talk all about that in the book. So it's a very practical guide. How do I add value to others? How can I leave a legacy? And um, just a few kind of questions before we wrap up here. Um, I was gonna just we've talked about some of these influences before, um, but I kind of alluded to that about the key books that have influenced your personal development. But I wanted to just get your thoughts on some of the things that you've learned. I felt like you got a lot from Ascentive, the company, just by knowing Mike and Don and Ivan. So, um, how can people learn about business more than just from books? Or like some of those thoughts, I just they're buried in some program that has a copyright now, and you learned it because you had the benefit of knowing these people. But um you know I don't know if you could just talk a little bit about your development and your knowledge of business, because it really, the difference in looking at your path wasn't really books, it was more connections and learning from people, the things that they know.
Yeah, I always liked there's a book by Sandler, does the Sandler method of sales. And I love the title, which is "You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar." And and it's just sort of this idea that it isn't, it's not the seminars are not where you learn. You can do things that you can get ideas, but you've got to put them into practice and have the practice. And I think, some of the ways to be a better business owner is to be around people who own businesses and are successful at it, right? Who are at your level or higher. And also people who are at a lower level, because, they come in and you can mentor them. And BNI is a great environment for that. Provisors is also a good environment, but there's a level of success there that you have to be at already to get in there. But then you find people are just is quite amazing. And at the same time, it's also a lot of attorneys um, who are great at referring each other, by the way. But the point being is, a lot of people join BNI because it's supposed to be about referrals. But I've heard it called something like getting the MBA in small business, because you are around people who, are doing this as a matter of survival and success and earning money. And so, you ask them, you talk to them, you meet with them, and you learn from them. You put them on Quantum Leap and they talk about it too, right? the so I think it's, you can learn a lot from books, but they're not going to give you everything you need. And a lot of times they'll tell you stories and stuff like that, but you've got to put these things into practice, and it's easier to practice when you're around people who are also practicing, right? I mean, even if you're in solo, even if you do solo golf, you're still out on the course with people who are also playing solo golf and learning. And maybe you have a coach who helps along with that to show you where your swing is bad. Same in business. And you can have a business coach, but you can also have mentors. And there's a lot of like free systems out there where people will help you. So but you're not going to get that from books. You'll probably get ideas from books that you can take to other people, work them out, and then put them into practice.
Yeah, also this concept of collaboration. I was going to ask you more about BNI in a second, but this concept of collaboration, I know Ivan just put a new book out, or his last two books have been on collaboration. I feel like that's something really unique and setting people apart, especially in today's world, about collaboration. So, I mean, that's something that you can learn in BNI, but are there any other venues for collaboration. I think experimentation, I mean, we kind of feel like we got a little bit lucky with this podcast, but this is, one example of a collaboration. But, um, yeah. And I haven't read
Yeah,
Ivan's last book on the third paradigm. I'd love to talk about it more once we read it, but he also has that new book called Infinite Giving, which I feel, giving's almost a way of collaborating. That's kind of Ivan's method for success. He finds out, that anecdote about when I find somebody who I want to collaborate with, he goes out and finds a way he can help them first to kind of break the ice and build that trust.
yeah. The third paradigm is actually a little different because it takes another step beyond collaboration, which is co-creation, and which is a fairly relatively new concept. I think that, and it's challenging, right? So I think his book is not the first, but it is definitely one of the first that's maybe more accessible. I've been looking for other books on co-creation, and there are ideas, there's academic ideas behind it and so on, and some people have put it into practice, but it's not, you don't have somebody like who's made it as accessible as Ivan has, and I think there'll be other authors on that. The challenge with the co-creation process is you can't, some of these authors, they're big names and so on, and they're very good. I could see like Seth Godin doing it and some others, but some people are just not co-creative. It just doesn't work for them. They can't let go of their ego. And that's fine too. We don't, I mean, Elon Musk, I could never see him being co-creative. It just isn't his style. Um, so it's a fascinating thing, but most people can be collaborative, right? You have to be collaborative to be in business, to collaborate with your clients, to collaborate with, your vendors, all those different people. It's a very important skill to build if you don't have it.
And I do find that collaboration is one of those essential things, actually being a thought leader. And I don't have a chapter on that in the book, for example, but if you want the best way you can advertise your ideas, if you have other people out there pushing them as well, that's how
Right.
things spread. And, so, that kind of goes to leadership and influence a bit, but I think there is, how do you look for ways to, creatively collaborate? And I mean, that's what I love about the podcast, but, there has to be other ways, I mean, I think networking groups, we can just end with our question on B&I because um, a lot of times, you put ideas out there, they're not necessarily packaged in a way that's like people don't even understand what the point of them is, for example, until you actually have to teach them to somebody and have them like adapt them, for their own. So, um,
Yeah.
but what would you say makes BNI a great venue in terms of that MBA? I mean, like like we know what an MBA is more or less, but I do feel like BNI is even more valuable than a MBA in part, although people getting an MBA also have the benefit of learning around their peers, and that can also be beneficial as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, being a member of Provisors, I meet a lot of people with MBAs, and it's definitely valuable to what they're doing. We call the BNI like more the MBA in small business because small business, while some of those principles apply, a lot of times we're wearing all the same hats, and we don't necessarily have that level, that to get to the mid market yet, right? And so the MBA isn't really beneficial, right? The CFO with an MBA could probably help your business, but they would probably find it not terribly valuable until you hit that million or 2 million mark. And most of us in BNI are not at that level. A lot of us are just kind of have jobs, right? That we pay ourselves. And that's fine too. I think there's so much benefit to that because you're meeting so many people who are in the same space as you are. And the ones who have success are the ones that are well worth learning from. The one of the benefits of BNI is that it is consistent. It is like you've got to show up every single week. And some people are like, oh, that's too much. But that is, your marketing time, your learning time, and your being around people who are really in the same, space as you are. And so that's why it's so beneficial. I think it's worth being a member even if you don't need business. I did it for years when I didn't need any business, right? I had plenty of work and was, working full time with a couple of projects, and but I kept it going because I really, spending all day with employees who kind of complain about their boss and everything else just was not doing it for me. I needed to be around people who are, forward thinkers and dealing with business, and also keeping relationships that I know will pay off when the time comes that I do need new clients and new projects. So, you keep giving, you keep participating, keep being a part of that, and it pays off in many different ways.
Yeah, and a couple anecdotes come to mind to me as examples of how B&I can be so unique. And one of those is coaching. You say how coaching is kind of hard in B&I, but yet it's so essential for people. So I think B&I kind of teaches you how people think about coaching and maybe how to approach other
Hmm.
people for clients and coaching. The other thing that comes to mind is marketing. Everybody needs to learn how to be a better marketer, but then when you see business owners, they have like 100 other things they're doing, and then how do you kind of focus on the marketing? So that's been kind of a nut that I've always been trying to crack with the marketing, how to get at the marketing. So um, I don't know if you have any thoughts on how people approach coaching and BNI, or um, I just feel like people who tend to be in BNI tend to be more coachable than people not in BNI. I mean, in my opinion, because they're open to some of those ideas that I think make coaching, effective. But
No, that's probably true. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's entirely true. I mean, and there's reasons people may not be in BNI because it's, the wrong time. They can't find a chapter. Lots of possibilities, but so I do think that's true of people who go out and network and meet other people and see that as, the goal is not and sometimes it is just social time, right? We don't always can't always be around the right people who are going to give us great referrals, but we can have that sociability. We're just talking about that in a provisors meeting today, where some people have been around a long time just because they have friends, right? It's like these are the friends. These are the like it's almost like your workmates, right? I haven't had a real job in a long time, but I've like I said, I've worked in environments where I was consulting and working around employees, and a lot of them they work with the same people day after day, and they talk and they develop some friendships and maybe some enmities and all that. And I think we as business owners, we don't really get that, right? It's hard to be friends with your employees because there's a relationship there that shouldn't, that needs to be protected. And so, but with our colleagues that we see regularly, we can develop, much deeper social relationships. And, we're working again on the same level. I think that's a huge value of something like BNI, where we see them regularly and then have, social gatherings and other things. Not everybody, gravitates to that, but a lot of people do.
yeah, yeah, no, well put. And well, great. I was going to mention too. You and Gail can feel free to distribute up to, 20 copies of that trilogy as a little Christmas thank you. And I'd love to
Sure.
talk to you guys more about those books as you kind of get more time
All
to
right.
review the new one. And thanks for taking an initial look at that new book, Thought Leader, with me. So we are coming back next week for one more episode before our holiday break, and we're going to be talking about video and some partnerships, just kind of tying down some loose ends here before the break, and I'll look forward to it. So, but thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And Corey and Dave, we're going to sign off, and thanks for listening.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.